from the sign up, but we'll go ahead and get started here. Hopefully more people will come in. Good morning. My name's Scott Anderson. I'm State Materials Engineer for UDOT. And this breakout session has to do with the approved products list that we just recently put back into place. We put together a new policy and procedure that governs how it works, as well as inserted into the specifications for its use. So Wendy Tripp administers that program. She's going to go over that. I don't think we're going to take the full hour and a half on this one, but I think we'll probably be about an hour. That's what we anticipated when we put the thing together. So anyway, we're going to get some echoes from around the other places here. So anyway, kind of give you a little bit of history, and maybe before I get started on that, we've got the normal sign-up. If you need continuing education credits, this is how they track them. So be sure to sign up for that if you need those. Also, if you are from out of state and you need one for your home state, for your license there, we have a form we can fill out that you can take with you. So I will go ahead and start these on both sides. The other thing we have here is, we'll keep this up at the table, but if you would like for Wendy and Ben to come out to your company or office and go over this, we'd be happy to do that. We know this is going to be not a real complicated process, but for the contractors especially, there will be some things they will have to do differently in this process. Wendy will go over that. And so if you feel you would like to have more of your folks get this training, we'll be happy to come out and do it. Just sign up on this. I'll leave this up here. Before I introduce Wendy and turn it over to her, I'm going to take a little bit of time and kind of recap why we ended up bringing the approved products list back. Some of you may remember in years past, I think it's probably been about 10 years now, that we eliminated a list of products and we've gone through some different transitions with that. At one time it was an approved products list. When I was a resident engineer, we had a list of products that you could look at the list. If it was on the list, you were okay to use it. That was all you needed to do. And as a resident engineer, I really liked that. But as that list began to grow, there began to be some problems with it. Some of the divisions were referencing the list without providing a specification or a standard to it. So it was kind of creating a loop where in the standard they created, the standard specification they created, they would reference the APL, and the APL would in turn reference the specification in UDOT standards. And there was never any standard specifically cited. So that was one of the problems. The other problem was there were some classifications of materials that didn't really, fit being done with, they didn't totally meet the standard, but they had been applied on projects and work. So there were some of those issues. So it was determined at that point, about 2005, to eliminate the APL. In bringing it back, we've tried to close those loopholes on it. We've created a panel that's comprised of folks from different divisions within the department, from structures, hydraulics, etc. And they are responsible for looking at the submittals and making sure that they meet the specification or standard as cited. And then all we're doing with this process is taking that paperwork, storing it in ProjectWise, and so what we're trying to accomplish here is cut down on paperwork for the construction crews or the consultants we hire to fill that role, as well as for the contractors, because right now, with each applicable standard in the specification, you have to come up with those test results and documentation showing that that product meets the standard. And with this process, if it's on the list, you won't need to do that. But what the contractors will need to do, and Wendy will go into that, is print out a form citing that that product is on the list and turn that into the RE, and then that's it. Now, we did not eliminate, if the product is not on the approved products list, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't use it. But if you choose to use it, which is fine, we don't have any problem with that, you need to go through with what has been the current process of providing all the documentation for that product. But if there are products out there that you know meet the standard, and as a contractor you like those products, I would encourage you to submit those or take your supplier and point them towards Wendy and get them on the list. So that was the whole intent. When I talked with Federal Highways about this a few years ago, I said, you know, it doesn't make a lot of sense if we have the documentation in hand, whether it's our construction crew or whether it's central, it doesn't matter. It's covered. The documentation's covered as long as we can access it and pull it up. Federal Highways agreed with that, and so that's when we started talking about reincorporating it. Well, if right, so to make sure I understand the question, so if you have a product on there, does it need to meet the Buy America standard? Well, what we're trying to do with this is once you submit it into Wendy, she reviews it, she stores it. That should be all the paperwork you need to submit. Now, Buy America could get a little, I don't know if we're
still requiring Buy America to come out with the shipment. Oh, sorry. Buy America still needs to come out with the shipment. We're accepting your product that it meets our standard, but because the heat numbers and the coatings can change over as you sell it, we can't actually accept that. That has to come out with the shipment.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I was having a little trouble understanding what you're saying, but yeah, that's right, because, you know, it's not going to be the same heat and shipment of metal and each time you use a product, right? You're going to have the different supply of if the Buy America applies. So yeah, that's going to have to kind of roll and be submitted as you use it. So, okay. So that gives a little bit of the history of why we brought the Buy America back. I'll turn it over to Wendy, but a few things about Wendy. She grew up here in the Salt Lake area. Not too far from here, over by the mouth of the canyon. I remember her saying she spent a lot of time hiking in the hills over there, but at any rate, she's been with UDOT for 30 years, and most of that time she's been in Region 2 on a construction crew running the field lab. So Wendy has a tremendous amount of experience with materials testing and documentation of those products. And so we were really excited when she came down to the central office. She's been with us for about 4 years down there now, a little over 4 years. And she initially came into our TTQP group that certifies our technicians on testing And then when Barry Sharp retired, she took that opportunity to move over and take over this program. So she's done a great job with that. I really appreciate the effort she's made. And with that, I'll turn it over to her.
Thanks, Scott. Welcome to the UDOT Approved Products PowerPoint presentation. I'm a little nervous, so if I start to speed read, mention it to me, I'll slow down a little bit. Because the speaker's right here, I won't be able to wander, and normally I wander, so. Let's start off. This is a little awkward. I'm gonna have to, there we go. I'm gonna have to move over to the computer each time to do it. They didn't bring a clicker for me. So, personnel involved. Oh, perfect. Thanks, Ben. Okay. Personnel involved directly with the APL is Ben Shee, the Materials Implementation Engineer. He oversees the activities of the Approved Products Program. All documentation should be turned in to myself at the email here on the screen, Wendy Tripp, and electronic submittal is the preferred method for submitting your documentation. This is not the same program that it was in place, as Scott had mentioned earlier. We've broken down the program down completely and kind of rebuild it from the ground up. What we did in the process is we separated a couple of things. The approved products list is now managed by the materials, and our experimental features is now handled in research. So we split those two out so that everybody would know the approved products. What we've done with those is a product that meets our standard specification or standard drawing is what we're putting on that list. All products on the list are actually tied to a specification number now also. One of the big questions, as Scott had elaborated a little bit, is how does the APL and the Certificate of Compliance now work together? What we're doing is with the APL, if your product is on the APL, we would prefer that you use the compliance form off of the APL. If your product is not on the APL list, turn in a certificate of compliance with the paperwork to the project engineer, and you can use your product that way. Let's go to the next. Why have an approved products list? The purpose of the APL is to reduce the construction man-hours spent reviewing the paperwork. Some of the construction crews don't have all the access to the ASTMs or AASHTOs that they need to review those products. This makes it a little easier sending it into our group where we have access to those things to look at it a little better. This was the main driver to bring the APL program back, but in doing so, we found that the APL could be used in several ways. As a resource for our maintenance division, how about a resource for emergency repairs? We now have a list out there of approved products that if something happens, and we see it happen quite often, that piece of equipment hits a girder and chips it out, we have a list of products that we can, is approved for patching that. Yes? Absolutely, absolutely. We're not restricting anybody to use the APL as a sole source. We're using it as a resource. So if they have another program or something in place where they accept products, that's still in place. This is just an added resource for everybody to use. Mm-hmm. Yes, he would turn in a certificate of compliance with all the necessary documentation, and he would turn that into the engineer himself or the maintenance person reviewing it, and they would review it and accept it at that point. Actually, we have a compliance form that you can populate through there that states what it is and what specification it should be used for. So he populates that, and along with that population, we also have the installation and technical and MSDS that can go with it so that they're aware of those parameters that are around that product. But those are the only things that they do need to include with that paper.
That was one thing I didn't clarify real well. When we went in and put this in and changed the specifications to allow for the approved products list, we only went into the materials standard specification, UDOT standard specification. And that is where we inserted the allowance for use of the approved products list. So all of the other individual materials standard specifications did not change. So you can still, you have a choice here. Our preference would be, if it is on the approved products list, utilize that method. As Wendy's mentioned and will outline further, there's a sheet that you fill out to turn into the RE. But if it isn't on the approved products list, the standard is still, for that material, is still standalone. You can use the material certificate of compliance. If you have something that isn't on the APL, you can use it and just follow the procedure we've used for years. Just turn in the documentation to the RE, shows that it meets the standards cited. He has to review it and approve it. But that's what we're trying to short circuit, that process with the APL, is you just print out one sheet, hand it in, and it's done.
Okay, continuing on, another benefit of having the APL at this time. Having the APL also gives the project engineer and the contractor a backup list of approved products should something happen to their supplier and they're not able to get that shipment of products in. They can go to our list and actually look there. On that list, it gives the approved product, plus it also, for their convenience, it gives a supplier of that product. You do not have to use that specific supplier to get the product. If you can get that same exact product through another supplier, that's acceptable, but we just, for convenience, we do give a supplier of that product. How does it get started? We're going to start off with how you turn in the information and the whole process that it goes through. This is our R52 form. This is the application for product evaluation. This form can be found on our APL web page and downloaded in either a Word or a PDF format. The form is to be filled out in its entirety. Please do not leave any questions blank. If a question is non-applicable, please put an NA or non-applicable in there so that we know that that just wasn't missed when you turned in the application. Question number 4 is asking, does your product meet a UDOT standard or standard drawing? As I mentioned earlier, only products meeting UDOT standard specifications or standard drawings are put on the approved products list. There is a link on the APL webpage for both the UDOT standard specifications and standard drawings. Please make sure to reference one of the specifications when you're filling out your R52 form. Please do not put non-applicable as an answer to question number 4. And yes, we have had people turn them in saying non-applicable. As we talked, if your product's non-applicable to our standards, that's what we're looking for. That's exactly not what we're looking for, right? Okay, we're going to cover the Buy America a little bit, which we talked about just a little previously. Buy America You'll notice that question number 7 asks about the Buy America products. If you're not familiar with the Code of Federal Regulations governing these type of products, please visit the website for more information about the Buy America Act. A link to this website is also posted on our APL webpage for your convenience. UDOT has included a section in our standard specification, 1455. I believe it's section 1.16, and it states what documentation needs to come out with your Buy America products to the project, what needs to be shipped with them. So if you're familiar with that specification, those are the same documents that you have been shipping. All products that fall under the Buy America Act will be required to ship with that documentation. At this point, as you can see on the pie diagram here, we only have less than 4% of the products in the APL at this time are Buy America. VOC requirements. How many of you are familiar with the Department of Air Quality's new VOC requirements that went into effect as of January 1st of this year? Is everybody aware of those VOC requirements? Yes, they did put in some VOC requirements. The requirements apply to these counties here. It's called the Utah Administrative Code, R307-361, Architectural Coatings. It addresses volatile organic compounds, VOCs, across the Wasatch Front. Basically, most of these counties are across the Wasatch Front. The purpose of this code is to limit the VOC emissions in these counties listed on the screen. These requirements apply to any person who supplies, sells, offers for sale, or solicits the application of any architectural coating within these counties. It also applies to anyone that manufactures, blends, or repackages any architectural coating. Some of the products that would fall under the architectural coatings would be curing compounds, bond breakers, concrete sealers, concrete healer sealers, form release compounds, paint, or primer. If you feel that your product could fall under this category monitored for the VOC content, please download this administrative code. We've also put a link on it on our APL page for your guys' convenience. Only products meeting the VOC requirements are listed on the APL at this time. The reason for this is we expect those VOC counties to grow over the next few years. The DAQ has a close eye on southern Utah at this point, and with the growing population and air quality in St. George, we wouldn't be surprised in the next couple of years that these VOCs are going to be enacted down in the counties, the Washington County down there. What if you're not in a county that regulates for VOCs? How can a product with higher VOCs be used? Same way that we talked earlier. You use a certificate of compliance, you download the documentation, turn it into the project engineer, and the project engineer does the acceptance of that product. Areas in the administrative code document that you should pay close attention to are stated above. There are a couple of ways to document the product's VOCs. One way would be acquire independent laboratory testing results. The other way would be to show the documentation of the VOC content, would be to use the information from the manufacturer's material safety data sheets. And on the board here, we've referenced the pages Page 6-13 tells you how to calculate that according to the DAQ. Back to the R52 form. If the products you're submitting meets more than one standard specification, we're going to ask you to submit an application for each of those specifications that you're wanting the acceptance in. At the bottom of the form is a general statement about what type of paperwork to submit with the form. Accepted products are based on the approved products list for a 4-year period. Independent test results may not be dated more than 1 year from the date the R52 form is received by UDOT to review. The purpose for this is to minimize any potential risk by making sure the products on the APL are being tested at an acceptable frequency. This may seem a bit harsh for some people, thinking that they have to test their products every 4 years, but we're covering such a variety of products in there. 4 years may be too close for some and too stretched out for others. And for us to administer the program, we needed to come up with something that we felt was fair both to UDOT and industry, and the 4-year seemed to be pretty acceptable. It's if you're familiar with the NetPEP program, they usually use a 4 to a 5-year spread on that also. The panel members for the approved products list are, they include the materials, construction, environmental, research, design, maintenance, structures, traffic and safety, hydraulics, and each one of the UDOT regions has at least one representative on that panel. What we tried to do is we tried to get as many of the divisions or groups on the panel as possible so that we had a good panel listing. Okay, the submittal of the R52, let's kind of walk through this flow chart together. The manufacturer supplier submits the R52 form and all the supporting documentation to myself, Wendy Tripp. Electronic submittal, as stated before, is the preferred method. The coordinator then reviews the documentation for completeness, making sure that all the paperwork needed to make a complete review of the product is included. I may ask or email back asking for more documentation. The purpose for this is once we have all the documentation, I'll assign it to one of the panel members of the group that owns that specification, and there's no sense in turning it into somebody that's incomplete and wasting the time. We get it all gathered up to begin with. If the documentation is complete, the coordinator assigns a member of the approved products panel from the division that owns the specification. I don't know if you guys knew that each one of our specifications are owned by different divisions or groups that manage those specifications. So we will have an actual representative from one of those groups reviewing the paperwork, which gives, I think, a higher quality look at on that review, because we have the people that write those specifications reviewing those. Okay, continuing on with the flow chart. After the panel member finishes the submittal review, panel member then reports back to the coordinator. The supplier or manufacturers are notified by an attached letter in an email. Because of the depth of some of the specifications that we have, products may be accepted with limitations. If your product has been accepted with limitations, the limitations will be stated on the acceptance letter. At this point, the product is then placed on the APL for a period of 4 years. In that 4 years, if the okay. We're working on that list continually. As the products come in and they're reviewed and they're either accepted or not accepted, we're modifying that list constantly. Yes. Yes, on the acceptance letter, it will give you a date, and that the date on that letter is when your product was put on that list. And that starts that 4-year period. Yes, yes. Exactly. Exactly. It is a revolving system, yes. And so you'll see that products are on there. They'll be taken off. It is the manufacturer or supplier's responsibility to track that date. No, what we're calling it is a renewal, and the renewal is basically the same way you got on the APL to begin with. You're going to submit the same documentation again. What we're looking for is updated MSDS, technical, and testing. If there's required testing on that product, we're looking for updated testing results out of an independent lab stating that you've gone through and had it retested and it does meet our specifications. Okay, the supplier or manufacturers are notified. We talked about that. If your product has been accepted with limitations, limitations will be stated on your acceptance letter. At this point, the product is then put on the APL for a period of 4 years. If the product performs in the field and there have been no changes to the product within the 4 years, it'll stay on there. But if you change the formulation or the manufacturer's name, we require that you notify us, because that's a reason to take it off and relook at it at that point. Changes to the manufacturer's MSDS, changes to the installation process, any of those things, we require you to notify us to make sure that we still have the appropriate information there. Those installation and technical data that is to be printed out with the compliance form is critical to the people in the field. Okay, what happens after the 4 years? After the 4-year acceptance period, the product will be removed automatically from the APL if it has not been renewed before the expiration date. The renewal process is the same as the initial application for evaluation. The manufacturer or supplier is expected to furnish updated documentation and testing results with their renewal application. The manufacturer or supplier will have to track their expiration themselves. It is suggested that the manufacturer or supplier get started on the renewal process prior to the expiration date. That way your product never comes off the list. If you've updated prior to that expiration date, we'll give you a new date and it just continues on. Otherwise, it could be pulled off. The APL was designed to accommodate some of the products used on UDOT construction projects and the maintenance of our road system, but the APL is not all-inclusive, does not cover all the products that might be used in either construction or maintenance on our projects right now. What we did is we started off with a little bit smaller list than what we have out there currently, and we expect it to grow in the future, but we wanted to come out a little bit smaller, and for the first year kind of work the bugs out, get everybody knowing what's going on, how to use it, and then from there expand out just a little bit. Let's see. Product use on construction projects. We know it takes time and good coordination with the suppliers and manufacturers to get the products to the project site on or before they are needed. Sometimes products are used from phase to phase on projects. In order to keep consistency on the projects, what we've done is we've allowed the product to be used throughout the duration of that project. There is a couple of stipulations on that, is as long as the product was valid on the APL after the project award date and prior to the project completion, you can use that project, or you can use that product on there. If for some reason they've downloaded the information and the products come off after they've downloaded it and been using it on the job, give me a call. I can give you another letter if you need one for your documentation. We're not going to pull the product out from the middle and tell these guys, hey, look for something else. We don't think that that's fair either to the contractor or the engineer on that. Okay, the APL database and compliance form. And hopefully I can get into this okay here. And there we go. All right, pulled it up. Okay, when you get into the APL website, this is UDOT's approved products list. It's managed by the Materials Division. We have a small acceptance that you need to read getting on. So what you're going to do is you're going to read through this. Check on the box here. It tells you, I understand and accept the terms and disclaimer. Go ahead and click in on it, and it'll take you right into our website. This is online for everybody to use at this time. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with our database. I can see you squinting a little bit trying to see it. Sorry, I wish I could enlarge it for you. Let me show you a little bit about it. It's an interactive database. They've got some really cool functions here. What we can do is we can go in and we can tap on the specification number, and then we can go down to any specification that we'd like, click on it, and it'll pull up all those products that are accepted under that specification at this time. You can also go in and search by manufacturer. So we go into the manufacturer, ADA Solutions, click on ADA Solutions, and it pulls up everything that ADA Solutions has on our approved products list at this time. Our 52 number is individual to a product per specification. That's a number assigned by UDOT itself. And let's go in and we'll look, and I'll show you how to populate the compliance form. And I've already pulled up some information for myself. If you already know your R52 number, you can come here into the box, 08036, and pull it out by the R52 number. And we're going to go into View. View is going to take you in, and it's going to tell you what the product is, how it was accepted, and if there's any limitations or anything with it. It also gives you the manufacturer, and I believe, let's go down a little bit farther and see what else we've got here. It's got our limitations in there. It's got the date that the review was done and who did the review. This is an environmental owns the specification, so environmental were the people that reviewed and accepted it. Let's come back up here to our compliance form. Off here to the right is the compliance form. And in order to populate this, we're going to click into this arrow. It's going to bring up a sheet. And if you do know your PIN number of the project, most people know either go by the PIN number or CID. PIN number that I've chosen, 4375. hit search. It's going to bring up the project you're looking for. Once it's brought up the project and information, you go into item, and it's brought up the individual items from that project. So now you can go in and you can search for the item that goes with this material. Going down a little bit. Here we go. Click on the item that goes with that. And you can hit print on the compliance form. This will pop up every time. What it's looking for is it's looking for those PDFs that are attached, if any, that have technical data, installation, or your MSDS is what it's looking for. And we would like those printed out, if there are any, with this. So we're going to hit OK. So it's populated that form for us. Let me get back here. Here we go. Here's what your form will look like. This is your APL compliance form. It's got the specification on the top that the material was accepted under, which is a 1571 temporary environmental controls. It has all your project information on it. It's got the contractor, subcontractor. And if we go down here and look at it, let's see. We've got the item number that it's meant for, and it's got the materials description. Incidental construction, drop inlet barrier, fiber roll, 18-inch. And so when you're ordering on your product limitations, you know that you need to order an 18-inch fiber roll for that drop inlet. These should match up. Is that pretty easy to follow, go through? We've basically added everything for you, so you can populate that sheet pretty easily. That's the important parts of archiving. I know that sometimes it's being able to control that, so it's better to get these off when it's truly done. Okay. The engineer is going to review the documentation and verify that the product on the compliance form is applicable for the project specifications. Here's another compliance form that I did populate, and this is a Buy America compliance form. You'll notice down here at the bottom, if it is a Buy America product, it will say Buy America on the form itself, and it mentions the supplier and project engineer to follow the current UDOT standard specification in our 1455 part 1.16, and that tells you what documentation needs to be shipped with that product to the job site. Also, down here under manufacturer's recommendations, it tells you to see the attached PDF for installation and instructions and MSDS. If those papers aren't with this when you turn it in, this notifies the engineer that there's more papers that need to go in with it, that they are, that was PDFs that were in there. Yes? Mm-hmm. No, it's actually added in there, and so, but you do have to click on an attachment to print them out with it. But they are all there, which makes it easier for the manufacturer, so he doesn't have to send his MSDS and his installation. He doesn't have to send them in over and over and over to a project because you've already got them downloaded and in there. Okay, document storage. All the documents for the APL accepted products are packaged, and they're put in group-wise at this time, or project-wise, sorry. Project-wise. If you need those packages for any reasons, you need those. The only ones that have access to that right now is my boss Ben and I. But if you need those, just give us a call. We'll be happy to download them and send them to you. Everything that went into that review process, the acceptance letter, all the documentation, the R52 form, all of that is packaged together, and we save it all. We have it one electronic, and we also have a hard copy. Again, the benefits of having an APL. The review of the documentation was performed by a representative of the division or group owning that specification, giving that product a quality review. The APL effective date, as of July 28th of this year, the APL went into effect for all those projects being bid. So it is now in effect, and it has been in effect for a couple of months. And it's also, if you're looking for where it is stated in our specification, it's stated in 1455 supplemental, and it of our specifications, sorry. The APL projected future. We have a 1 year, a 3 year, and a 5 year plan in place. I had already talked about bringing it out and starting a little bit smaller with this. So the first year, what we want to do is we want to introduce it, get everybody on board, understand it, working through it, knowing what's going on. In the second and third year, what we want to do is we want to include more products, expand the process, get more products out there that we're looking at. And we also see, if you're familiar with the NetPep that I talked earlier, NetPep can be a valuable tool to our APL. Right now, I believe the only products that we're accepting through NetPep through our specification is our HDP pipe, but they have a really good program and some other items. Environmental, we're looking at maybe adding environmental to the NetPep program also, which if you're not familiar with NetPep, I'll try to just cover it briefly. What it is it's a national program set up through AASHTO, and AASHTO and all the other states that are members of that, they look at these products, they send them out, they have them independently tested, and they don't say whether they meet a specification or don't meet a specification. They tell you what the results are, and so individual states can go in there and pick it out, pull those testing results out, and say whether they do or don't meet their state specifications. They're used by most of the states out there right now. They also have an auditing program where they send people out to the plants and the manufacturers, and they look at their processes, they review, they take independent samples, and they'll say whether they're compliant with their program or not compliant with their program. It's a pretty good program. It's in depth. The other thing that we'd like to talk about is thank you for coming and listening to our presentation today. Hopefully I wasn't too monotone and boring for you. But I would like to open it up if you guys have any questions that you'd like to talk about the APL or anything that I haven't covered today. Yes. Oh, that's pretty good. That is pretty good. You've run into some resistance on some of that stuff. Well, that's a sticky situation, isn't it? You know what? The approval on the APL should allow those products to be used on the project. Sorry. The only thing that could hold them back, in my thought, would be maybe there's a supplemental out, maybe there's something else that came out in the project that is asking for something different, and that product would meet a standard, but it doesn't meet our special provision. Maybe that's under a special provision and it doesn't really meet. I don't know what their hesitance would be on that, but you know, I hesitate to talk for them. You know, they've obviously have something, you know, that they're more knowledgeable about with that product. That. Mm-hmm. You should, yes. I mean, yeah. You want to answer that? Does the engine
I think what Wendy talked about is probably pretty accurate. I'm sorry, I don't hear so well, so your question, especially with all this background noise, I'm having a real difficult time hearing the question. But I would say the RE, if it's on the APL and the standard is in place for the project, the product should be used. It should be acceptable. And if you hit that situation, let us know, and then we'll get in touch with the RE and get that worked out if that happens. I'm assuming you're talking you know, this could happen. Hopefully it hasn't happened, but because we really haven't gotten into it enough, except on a few projects we went through on a trial basis with this. But as Wendy said, if there is a special provision in place for that project, that may change what the requirements are, and that would be a different animal. In that case, the RE would be within his right to say, you know, yeah, normally in the normal standard, it would fit. But for this special provision, it won't fit. So, and, you know, we may have with because we use a lot of consultants and we're getting this program underway, that's why we've got the sign-up sheet up here. Some of you came in later, but we'll be happy to come out to, if you're a contractor, if you're a consultant, even if you're one of the UDOT crew, we've already talked with those guys a fair amount, but if you want us to come out, we'll be happy to come out and go through the program. And we just want to make sure, we understand there's probably going to be a little bit of, as we move into it, as Wendy said, in this first year, we expect there's going to be some snaffle with it. There's going to be some missteps, so. Wendy, did you have, I saw another hand go up. Yeah, the special provision is always going to take precedence over a standard. So, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so.
Just a couple more things. Talk about some of the products that go on. Right now, we have quality management plans that apply to, for example, our traffic marking paint, to cement, to hydrated lime, those types of things, and those are standalone. We're not going to try to cover those products on the APL. If there's a quality management plan in place for the material, that's what we're staying with. We're not going to look at those as going on the APL. You'd still follow the quality management plan process for those products. Another thing that right now we aren't putting on the APL is concrete admixtures, because the region materials engineers have to approve those mix designs as they use them. And so we didn't want to get into that argument of, well, the APL says it's okay, and the Army saying, well, in this, the way you combine the mix with other admixtures, you're adding super plasticizer or whatever, we don't feel it's going to work. So we're not putting those on the APL right now. But as Wendy said, as we grow into this, we expect that to expand. So, and again, if you do have further questions, feel free to call Wendy, and we'll be, like I said, we'll be happy to come out and visit with you directly on it.
Context so far is with materials that are being installed as part of the
That's a wonderful question.
this list also uses for tools and equipment documents will buy or rent.
Well, there will be manufacturers' recommendations on how it should be installed, but as far as installation, inspection, that will still fall to the crew.
Well, what I'm saying is they want to rent a backhoe, and that backhoe, in my case, they would rent a trench box or a road blade. Is that part of the policy for use of the
Unless the manufacturer covers that kind of an application, I would think that would still end up having to get resolved out in the field. Something to that effect. At least that's what I would take on that. Did I understand that right?
We're not putting equipment of that. We're not putting equipment on the APL. Is that what you're asking? Yeah, we're not putting equipment out there. It's just actual material. Materials, yes. Just materials or products being used on the job, no equipment.
So that would still fall under, you know, thinking back to when I was in the field, that would still fall under the conversation. If you're bringing out a piece of equipment that's causing damage or isn't doing the job, then we're going to have a conversation about that and try to figure out why isn't that working, or are there other alternatives that you can go to as a contractor. So. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? That's a good point, and that's something we'll have to look at developing. These are the kind of things that are good for us to think about, because I do expect we will be expanding it, and we should have some way of letting manufacturers, at least who are currently on the list, give them an update. You know, here's a notice of what new category, for instance, is being opened up. So that's a good point. I'm going to take note of that. We'll want to develop something in that process, so we communicate out to you guys, if you're a supplier of materials, what may be coming up that hasn't been there before but will be in the future. Okay. Well, thank you very much. If you did not sign on the attendance roll, totally up to you, but that's how they track your continuing education units. If you need them, if you're from out of state, again, we've got a form we can fill out for you. Other than that, we appreciate your attendance. Sorry that we didn't cover the full time. We thought we would have an hour, and so thanks for coming. Appreciate it.